Thank you for your service. When I arrived at Richmond, Virginia, one rainy Monday evening, I wasn't visiting for the views. I was here to see a good friend who had recently moved to Virginia. On my way to North Carolina, Richmond made a perfect pit stop and an opportunity to catch up with Emily Megan. I pulled up in a transitioning neighborhood. Transitioning being the white person's definition of gentrification, and parked my car on the side of the road. With blanket, pillow, and bag in hand, I was ushered inside by Emily. Emily is a mix of archetypes. She is the sexy librarian who is helpful with your research, but also down for a craft beer. Emily is a witty comedian with a sharp tongue. She is a warrior for people with a heart too big for her body, someone both decisive and calculative while surrendering to the chaos that whips up like a hurricane around her. I would like to believe I helped her get better with the hurricane preparation, given that I am a constant spinning typhoon of inescapable water. We crossed town to get some Mexican cuisine in Emily's Prius, a car that held many memories from trips to the beach, excursions for food, and an escape from pressing matters. Emily's younger brother Patrick was joining us. Working on some new music? Emily asked as she carefully turned down side streets. The aux cord was passed quicker than cocaine in a 1980s bathroom, and I played some demos. Certain friends have limited patience with my ability to rattle on about my projects and stories, books and albums, media and art. Emily has always shown patience while I explain my upcoming concept album or which story I want to construct next. After eating a burrito the size of my head, we moved on to a grocery store called Farm Fresh. Like any other grocery store, it was designed to harbor everything you'd expect. But I walked around like an Amish on Rumspringa, witnessing technology for the first time. They have vanilla melon hard seltzer? I gasped with the excitement of a single mother who realized they were getting a free night to themselves. That looks disgusting, Emily said, eyeing the vanilla melon hard seltzer the way the father character must have done to the runt of the litter in Charlotte's Web. Meanwhile, I was Charlotte herself, but substitute Piglet Wilbur for sugary booze. We had come to Fresh Farm for ice cream. What sounded like an easy task turned into an indecision of struggles over the flavor. Patrick lingered in the background, throwing out suggestions that neither Emily nor I seemed to appreciate at the time. It felt like we were parents, and letting your child pick the communal ice cream flavor would be bad parenting. We settled on s'mores, hoping the texture and flavor elements would be intriguing. Anything was better than basic vanilla in my book. The cashier was lovely, and when I told her I was from Cleveland, she looked taken aback, as if I had flown in from Sweden or Malaysia. Well, Aunt Cleveland is quite nice, the cashier said with a smile. These moments were the kind that made Emily roll her eyes with the full force of a Genghis Khan army division. Emily wasn't rolling her eyes at the cashier, but at my natural charm with strangers. Ice cream in hand, we returned to Emily and Patrick's shared house. We keep our dining room as an art space, music listening, 3D printing room, Emily explained. So it's perfect for a night, I said, helping them set up the mattress. Their kitchen was filled with snacks. We're a Costco family, Emily said. You guys have enough snacks to feed 3 after-church functions, I smiled. Emily's schedule was rough right now. She was balancing a few opportunities like a seal might balance 3 latex balls on its nose. Like a seal in the water, Emily was graceful, even under pressure. I could see light tiredness in her eyes, but she kept a warm smile my entire stay, as if pushing through the pain of her work to be the best host she could be. I'm excited to interview you, I said, turning on a recording device while returning to my melting s'mores ice cream. At this point, we felt confident that s'mores had been the right call. When I graduated college in 2016, I hit a brutal dark patch in my life. I graduated college, left behind the title of student, and was now expected to just run into the adult professional sphere fully polished. I felt half-baked, like a cookie that missed out on a crucial pre-oven elements of my bake, or even needed more time in the oven. I was supposed to be a tough cookie. Instead, I was a pile of mush dough masquerading as a circle of cooked cookie. This time was difficult because I was banking on an opportunity that ended up being taken away. It wasn't my fault, no drunk Instagram posts or inappropriate behavior. They had ended up reworking the department, and the job given to me had vanished. It was like giving a magician a $20 bill for his trick, only for the magician to run down the street. I wrote one of my favorite stories to date in this dark time, so it wasn't all bad. In fact, maybe it proved that I needed more rough times so I could create better stories. I'd thankfully gotten some part-time work at a few places, one being the radio station on their events team. But I was still looking for something new when my mother found an opportunity back at my high school. They were looking for recent college graduates who would be interested in doing a year of service. When I applied and interviewed, I remember talking about how service and action had always been important to me. I didn't say this at the time, but I did it because I was doing something. I knew I needed some kind of action, and at the time, I didn't really realize what I needed. But there wasn't a call from God or a higher purpose asking me to do this. It would just be something to do, and hopefully enjoy. From the jump, the experience was much more atypical for everyone involved. There were usually 3 to 4 volunteers serving the high school every year. That year only yielded one recruit, me. This became problematic. There was no way that I could do the work of 4 volunteers, and yet, as much as I tried to do, I felt like I was disappointing people because I wasn't bringing in the total yield of 4 human beings. It was as they expected the farm to produce as much milk with 1 cow, when in reality, you can milk that 1 cow as much as you want, and you'd still end up with the same amount of yielded milk. The school also received a Jesuit service volunteer. The program set up young post-college graduates with volunteering opportunities across the country. Emily Megan was one of the 7 Jesuit volunteers in Cleveland, and she had been chosen to work for the service program of my alma mater. The 7 volunteers lived in a cute house, cooked and cleaned together, and bonded immensely. How could you not when you were doing such an interesting, cutting-edge program and living simply together? I was allowed to stay in a large house on campus, which I declined. I had lodging going into the program, and I had 0 desires to live in a 4-story house alone. That sounds like the beginning of a serial killer Blumhouse production. It was a beautiful house, much more ornate than even the house I bought and live in now. But at the time, living alone in such a giant space was not going to happen on my watch. Some people were confused, maybe even upset that I wasn't using the house. Emily, meanwhile, enjoyed the benefits of my absence. Thank you for the keys. We used them to go over and watch The Bachelor and Cavs games. Our house didn't have AC, so we also used it for the AC. My first official question during our impromptu interview with Ice Cream was Emily's first reaction to meeting me. I told her the truth. Emily, I instantly thought you wouldn't like me. Both Emily and I laugh over that ridiculous sentiment that became untrue. I know I refuse to get drinks with, let alone host people I dislike. No way would Emily host someone overnight on a Monday night if she couldn't stand them. From the jump, I'm very loud, no filter, obnoxious. I explained my rationale. But you looked mannered and ordered and a little serious. I remember your Easter egg-colored shirt and your Christmas-colored tie. Emily joked that I was notorious for blending destructive patterns out of laziness and deeming them fashionable. It was like a half-untucked shirt. And your shoes. Back then, I wore shoes until they were practically disintegrated into ash. You looked like you rolled out of bed or something. I will admit, to this day, I have issues with that. I just always have to go. So I remember jumping pretty quickly into the work, but how long did it take for us to be friends? I think that was quick. We figured out early that it was just you and me. There were supposed to be 6 other people, and we were just stuck with each other. At times, I just didn't think you were a real person, Emily continued. I thought to myself, this guy is unbelievable. Both my ego and my storyteller mindset asked Emily for detail. I don't know, you're just indescribable. Emily's voice feels full of disbelief. You were nonstop all the time. It's unmatched. I remember us doing a lot of walking. We would just leave our jobs and walk around, Emily cackled. We would leave for lunch and it was 10 a.m. We'd come back around 4 p.m. Emily and I have an outstanding rapport, in case you're not feeling it. I quickly began testing the water to see what I could say. I think we were experiencing issues, not with each other, but with the work, organizations, and peers, so I kinda just decided to confide in you about these issues, hoping you felt the same way. I don't know when we started bitching about our lives, but it was pretty early on. We both saw through the bullshit immediately. We would just look to each other and say, "Can you believe that?" Emily and I believe that service has nothing to do with oneself. The acts you do might make you feel good, but they are more than just your actions. It's about the community, the world around you, the social problems and ills that affect our community, and the more incredible world. But sometimes we would run into people that love to pat each other on the back for doing the bare minimum, or people who fail to understand that there was more than just their 1 hour of volunteerism. People misread the story. They are apt to reference the starfish story of the kid throwing starfishes back into the ocean. But the starfish got back in the ocean because of him. The stress in that sentence should be how the starfish got back in the ocean, not about someone's involvement or motions. Sometimes I felt like people around us were a bit self-serving, I pointed out to Emily. Some high schoolers we worked with were looking for a college essay, Emily nodded. Every week, there would be a club for students and personnel to meet and discuss service opportunities. It was one of the most painful things that Emily and I had to experience due to the amount of "look at me" that would plague the meetings. Each meeting started with a prayer. Instead of saying it together as a group, the prayer was started and passed off to whomever felt called to say the next line. It was like prayer improv, except you know the lines. People hesitantly participated due to fear of being interpreted as someone who greedily grabbed a line of prayer, so it would take 2 minutes to power through 8 lines of prayer. During this time, everyone would awkwardly look around to see who would go next. It was the ultimate game of chicken, yet with God's grace. We were really good at avoiding masses and prep rallies, I pointed out. We would roll in around 10 a.m., dick around and pretend to type up emails, Emily said, recapping our daily existence. Then we would say we're off to a meeting, when instead we would work out at the gym for an hour or two. Then we would do lunch, usually just scrounging off free leftovers in the teacher's lounge. And then finally, we would be back an hour before teaching our classes, and our coworkers would be like, "Where have you been?" And we would just say, "Working." I think I played some loud music, and I got in trouble for playing music loudly at my desk. In my defense, the presence of music helps memory. Your desk was just blah, Emily said, her hands and mouth open to visually communicate how messy my desk was. There was a couple of different emails sent out about keeping desks presentable. It was in a vague script, but we all know who was being referred to in that group email. A big chunk of our job was running after-school programs that ran from 3:30 p.m. or so to almost 5:30 p.m. Emily was in charge of a violin club for 3rd through 8th graders and an adventure club geared towards 6th to 8th graders. I, meanwhile, wrangled up the younger kids for homework club and Lego robotics. Homework club revolved around finishing homework and then having fun after the homework was done. Most of the kids didn't have homework, so instead they would play board and computer games with the high school volunteers. The program ran itself. I was highly incapable of doing robotics. It was like asking a cat to share its knowledge of dog culture. The first semester involved taking Lego robotics from the early 2000s and programming them to do things. It was a mess, partially because I didn't know the Lego robotics program, robotics, Legos, or really anything in the laboratory science field. Thankfully, a physics teacher on staff helped with the class, and the high school volunteers tended to be super nerdy and knowledgeable. Emily felt the same way about violin club, especially since some of the young kids had joined the club because of their parents, and not because they believed they had a future in the orchestra. We were supposed to do a whole robotics tournament, but it got snowed out, the living antithesis to the idiom, much to my chagrin. I liked working with the kids, but they weren't that invested in the competition. It wasn't like we had a shot at winning. We would be competing against highly qualified school teams working in class. Meanwhile, we met once a week for 12 weeks after school. The second semester of robotics was much more fun because we just did fun science experiments, I remember. Who could build the tallest tower without crashing? Who could successfully build a bridge between 2 desks? It was educational, but much more relaxed. There was science, but I didn't need to overdo the science elements of it. It felt like I was hosting my own reality television program with the different competitions and activities we would do. On Wednesdays, Emily and I hosted Bigs and Littles. The program paired younger kids with a high school big. We then would do activities, trips, and games with the partnerships. Do you remember when we hosted a cotillion? Emily asked. Oh boy, did I remember it, but I wanted Emily to run through it for me. We were appalled by their manners, Emily said in the setup, so we wanted to try and inspire them. We brought in ties and had everyone wear them. We had plates and plasticware and some light bites. We were trying to do table manners and place settings, and it was so windy that day. All the plastic and paper flew over the yard. I don't think we got to the point of the event because we had to ensure we weren't littering. Another event was when we did a West 25th scavenger hunt, I recalled. This was back when I thought it was a good idea to bring young children and high school volunteers to Cleveland's busy restaurant and retail district down the street from the office. In a moment of panic, I was worried I had lost 2 of my students, who were quickly found. I had never experienced such adrenaline. It was a true moment of horror in my life. I was slipping out. You could hear me running up and down the street. Well, you could probably always hear me, but still, I probably shouldn't have relied as much on the high school volunteers. Sometimes they came in clutch, but sometimes it felt like they were useless. Sometimes the high schoolers were just as bad as the kids, Emily pointed out. Besides after-school programs, Emily and I were also part of a team that led two of the school's larger service endeavors. Emily worked on a team that would go out on Sundays year-round to provide food and resources for the unhoused community. They built relationships and would go down the streets of Cleveland to serve a hot meal and catch up with the connections. I will never forget when we sat in the kitchen peeling carrots for carrot soup. We had 20 pounds of carrots and needed to figure out what to do. It was actually delicious, but it took hours. I helped the service organization that provided pallbearers to those who needed it for their funeral services. It was a very touching mission. The work was some of the most complex emotional work I've ever had to do. There's a certain set of emotions when you're amongst 10 people at a service for someone who has passed. It's a real call to your own mortality. And you're wondering, why are there no others here? When I brought up those memories of being a pallbearer to Emily, she immediately made a connection to a character that rang a chord of memories through me. We have to talk about Smitty. Smitty was quite the character. He had one of the most devious little smiles I have ever seen on a person. He was a large man too, over 6 feet tall with white hair, but he had a smile that looked like it belonged on a troublesome deviant little southern girl named Jezebel. Smitty had the same thing for lunch every day, a bologna sandwich and a diet soda. It was the kind of diet that felt straight out of post-World War II America. He would sit in the front lobby with his meal, another thing that puzzled me, because we did have an exemplary kitchen area. Smitty unfortunately stopped being a volunteer towards the end of our year sentence. Didn't he run over too many curbs with the van? The large vans were not sturdy enough to take direct hits from curbs. I might be making this up, but he got into an accident or two, right? I know he didn't run anyone over, but some not-so-pretty things happened. Emily confirmed that Smitty had racked up too many problems behind the wheel and was no longer allowed to drive high schoolers. All I can remember about him is that smile. It was a capital C rotated to the side. One of our favorite stories, I'll call The Ballad of Shay, is about a woman we helped over our year. I helped buy her a train ticket to Nashville to get her away from an abusive situation with a boyfriend, Emily recalls, and there was a baby involved, I think, too. So the program spent a lot of money to get her that ticket. We helped her get out of Dodge. I dropped her off at the bus station, and a couple of days later, you and I were in my office, and a coworker told us that Shay was coming to see me, and then yes, there was a lesbian plot twist post-Nashville. The verdict is either Shay got to Nashville, said something to the equivalent of hell no, circled the train station and came back to Cleveland, or never boarded the train to begin with. Another ballad was Regina. She had a powerful personality and had some untreated mental health issues. She would constantly tell people that they were soldiers of God, or the opposite. I witnessed her speak to a few people, and she sensed evil in them. She was opinionated about her faith and the world around her. Considering her life circumstances, her opinions were the only things that she could control. Regina got into a fight with someone in the office, repeatedly saying that they gave off bad energy. Regina's neighbor actually tried to set her house on fire. They threw a Molotov cocktail through her house because they didn't want her living there. She was squatting and was also a hoarder and would bring in buckets of things from her daily travels around the neighborhood. During the fire, at the age of 65, she jumped out of the second-story window to avoid the flames. Emily visited Regina at the hospital to find out that her dog and cat had both passed away. What about Stanford? Emily's smile turned into a sidewise C like Smitty. Stanford was another unhoused individual we worked with a lot. He would constantly visit with a little limp and confidence that powered through his stutter. Stanford would walk into the office and immediately start demanding things. He would need clothes, products, and food, and we would, of course, rush to meet his needs, often at a personal inconvenience. You would be knee-deep in quicksand, and Stanford would stress how much he needed a baseball cap. I need a size 9 brand new black shoes, Stanford would strongly request. We gave you a pair last month, Emily would respond. My favorite Stanford story was when he asked Emily for something but was not happy that the item was the color he wanted. Sometimes it felt like Stanford was double dipping. He would barge in and then leave after he put in his request, Emily pointed out. One time he asked for a radio. Most of our work during the week was directly with younger students. The family I think about the most is the Smith family, Emily veered. 4 kids in one family with drunk parents. This was a harsh reality for some of our students. Some would get picked up extremely late by irresponsible parents who, in a way, considered their children afterthoughts. What about the 2 brothers, the Melendo brothers? We weren't sure about their names at first, but our memory worked in our favor that night. The older brother was Brian, and the younger brother was Justin. The older brother was well behaved, but the younger brother lacked social awareness. They had just gone to the doctor's that day, Emily said, concerning one day in particular with Brian and Justin. The doctor had told Brian that he was overweight and needed to be careful of what he ate, as so not to get diabetes, and they had Wendy's every day. Across the street was the iconic Wendy's. Hordes of young men from the school and various community characters always kept Wendy's flush with cash. I'm sure Wendy's was constantly turning over kitchen appliances to keep up with the order demands. They weren't supposed to eat Wendy's anymore. Apparently, Brian did visit Wendy's sneakily. Brian came into my office one time, and Justin arrived and immediately asked Brian if he had partaken in Wendy's. Brian denied the accusation twice over, which caused Justin to scream, "I smell it on you!" which caused Brian to confess that he had indeed enjoyed Wendy's. My favorite Justin story was how he was really misbehaving, so I had to revoke his popsicle privileges, I sighed. I'm a terrible disciplinarian, but he was so out of control and unmanageable that day, and upon finding out that he wouldn't get a popsicle, he had a meltdown. It probably would have been easier to give him a popsicle at that point. Many things were asked of Emily and me that we were unequipped or underprepared to handle. The largest challenge by far was asking Emily and I to be the spiritual counselors to high school volunteers. I think I led one single reflection, Emily confessed. I didn't even touch on it. I would make it quick prayer in and out. It just felt grandiose to what we were doing. One moment I will never forget, and I think about it because you deny it, is when you called a high school volunteer a crack whore. Run me through this because I have no memory, but I don't think I would push that line, I gasped. These days, I would certainly know better than to use the term in the first place. I wasn't there, Emily prefaced. Your team arrived downstairs from the reflection space, and one of the students, Meg, said that you called her a crack whore, and you said, no, I said like a crack whore. So many problems here, I said with a laugh. I shouldn't be using the term ever in the first place, but then why would she be defined like a crack whore to begin with? I wish I knew the context behind that. Moments like that made me think you were unreal, Emily said to me. One of the benefits of our free labor for the year was professional development. It was designed as a way for Emily and me to discover more about the world of professionalism, create contacts and networks, and eventually leave the nest of volunteerism for the real world. More often than not, it was canceled, or we went to a coffee shop and chatted for 10 minutes about what was going on, Emily recalled. It was so dumb. That was the biggest disappointment for me. The whole idea for this role was that there would be an advertisement for my career. I liked working with people, and I loved the service, but I didn't get professional help or those promises. One of the professional development sessions that frustrated me the most was when we did one of those "your personality is this color" tests. I'm the type of person who loves quizzes. Give me my astrology of the day, my Myers-Briggs, my temperament tests, and career tests all day. Going into this test, I was excited, and I loved finding out that I was orange. What I didn't like was how it felt like being orange was a bad thing. The descriptors surrounding the word felt negative, loud, boisterous, the kinds of things you say passive-aggressively to someone who you're trying to get along with, but has you at your wit's end. Emily got the color blue, which had words like calm, serene, graceful. When you stack up our colors against each other, I look like a real character. Emily confidently feels like I overanalyzed those test results. I remember you flipping out about being orange, Emily laughed. You would not let those descriptors go. The words they used to describe orange were so terrible, they were not that bad. Emily doubled down with a cat's grin. But you wouldn't hear otherwise, and it's fucking colors. I have a habit of sometimes beating a personal issue to death so others can see how in the right I am. I used to be very defensive, and I sometimes still showcase that defense by playing an aggressive offense. My favorite session of professional development involved using StrengthsFinder, a psychological assessment of one's strengths. I thought creativity or communication would be my biggest strengths, but they were merely on the top 5. My biggest strength was ideation. At first, I thought that was a lame strength until later that week, I realized that I was full of too many ideas. The psychological assessment came out to be accurate. Emily's number 1 strength was empathy. Another core memory of our year of service was constantly going over to the faculty lounge to get coffee, tea, cereal, and other delicacies, I said in a dream haze of remembrance over free food. Jungle Java, the worst coffee ever, Emily followed up. And anytime they had chocolate Chex cereal, we would be there all the time. I've never had chocolate Chex outside of that school. It was awkward sometimes to go into the faculty lounge because I would often be confused for a student. Sometimes I'd enter the faculty lounge to the stairs and walk into a faculty member who didn't know me. I was rocking a bold beard and looked a tad older, so it was shocking that people would mess that up. The Wednesday after Election Day 2016, Emily and I were leading our program Bigs and Littles. We decided to take everyone to the nearby beach. It was a terribly windy and gray day, as if Mother Nature was protesting the situation. Emily was quite depressed, and I was shell-shocked, if anything. Nobody wanted to be at that beach, Emily mused. It was the worst beach trip we have ever had. It was a metaphor for what was coming. Another sad moment was when we did a prayer service at Potter's Field. It's off the map, although I remember precisely how you would get to it. The city dumps the ashes of all the people who cannot afford to pay for their own burial services, either all alone or otherwise no one in the family can pay. Visitors are not typically allowed, the idea being that people can't cheap out on the burial costs and still visit their loved ones. It's a stark thought process and a starker place. There's nothing denoting its location. It's just a place. I think about Potter's Field often, Emily said when I brought it up. Thousands of people, no gravestones, proper grave, no family that can afford their burial, homeless people. The discussion felt like a tangle of strings we continued to dance through. We would momentarily grab a few bunch strings, react emotionally, move forward, and slowly lose old strings for new strings. To an outsider, it probably sounded like a collection of mumbles, but to us, the direction of our conversation made perfect sense. Let's talk about Jesuit dinners, Emily mused, staring at me intently. I was invited to the Jesuit house for dinner every Tuesday and Thursday. Usually there would be 3 or 4 volunteers who would go around. There were between 8 and 12 Jesuits, and a few of them really liked me. Most of them were older, a bit more stodgy, and not fans of mine. It felt like the awkward grandson of grandparents who felt obligated to see their grandson, then really enjoy the company. They had the best food, Emily sighed, dreaming of the food cooked not by Jesuits, but by a maid. I had mixed feelings about those dinners. My existence in general always felt like a tightrope based on my demographics. They had some old men who were stuck in their ways, Emily chirped. At the time, I was fine with it, but it really was a bit brave to continue to put myself in that place. I don't deserve a gold medal, but there is something to be said about placing yourself in slightly unfavorable places. No one was ever really mean to me, but there were things left unsaid, if told, would certainly cast a dourness over those meals. You would push it so much with those older men, some of the things you would say. Emily pretended to clutch her fake pearl strand necklace. My favorite joke you cracked in that house of Jesuits was when you suggested they get a dog and name it Emmanuel, so they could say, oh come, Emmanuel. It was so funny. That's the thing, you would always make us laugh. Emily's compliment reminded me of the time we had a job review. Emily doesn't recall hers, but I remember the one note I received. I was told that my emotions dictated the emotions around me. If Matt Hribar is happy, then everyone is happy. And if I'm not, then nobody is. It felt a bit accurate, but also a bit uncalled for. I've always been in touch with my feelings. I wouldn't say I've always been in control. I've always known how I'm feeling and why, and I'm not going to pretend to experience a different reality for someone's comfort. I don't want to upset people because I'm upset. I just live life transparently. Emily's favorite moments appear drafted from The Office or Parks and Recreation. We had a bet. Emily's face always lit up when an outrageous story was on the horizon. You would talk nonstop about how you wanted to do stand-up comedy, so I finally said you just need to do it. And we made a bet that you had 5 months to do stand-up. So because you lost, you had to make a vow of silence, a whole week of you being silent. And I remember sticking to it. You stuck to it, which was annoying because you can't come to work and not speak. I had a writing board. We were literally at a staff meeting with 5 people. There was no hiding. Our boss turned to you and couldn't believe you were sticking to it. You lasted for 2 days, which was just way too long. I don't see a problem. I lost a bet. Yeah, between you and me, you wouldn't talk to anyone. It speaks to my character. I try and live up to my bets and promises, I joked. I think finally you were like, please talk, but I didn't want to give up and let you win. One of the most horrific moments for Emily was when we reenacted the washing of the feet. For those unfamiliar, Jesus himself washed and kissed people's feet. For that alone, I would label him a martyr. I had to wash and kiss the most disgusting pair of feet I have ever seen. Emily gagged over the recollection. As much as Emily and I may have started drama, or at least maybe it was the irk to some people who desired more conventional things, we were far from the biggest scandal. After our time, a married staff member was fired for having an extramarital affair with another employee. In the fall, it was just Emily and me, but in the spring, we were joined that semester by a Jesuit novitiate, Billy. Billy, a budding Jesuit, loved nuns and reading, and somehow was the perfect blend of Emily and me, with more commitment behind his faith. He was pleasant, sweet, and funny, someone you could socialize and philosophize with. Another character was Thomas, another budding Jesuit who unfortunately would not be chosen to participate in the program. He had what I call an Eeyore tone. You know, the people who, even in their happiest moments, feel sad due to the tone of their voice. It's not precisely a Debbie Downer, but it shades away from it. We got to a point in the night where our recollection began to dim like two mighty lights powering a stadium of memories. We called it, worrying about overheating our little adult lives. Even then I knew that there were dozens of little stories, of characters, moments where we began to recognize that we were post-college adults. So many of these stories featured times when we felt underprepared, underutilized, and thrown into things we had no knowledge or control over. It felt like, if anything, a fast track into adulthood. Our frustration with what was happening was just the top of a glacier of systematic societal problems, corporate frustrations, adult relationships, and human error. It might seem like we stood on top of giant podiums, lauding how excellent we were, but both of us suffer from shades of imposter syndrome. How do we fit into this modern world? Are we capable of doing the jobs we have been tasked with, capable of handling our dreams and executing them? Some of our peers have skyrocketed onto scenes that we are barely gripping onto, even if others think we've made it. The following morning, I helped pack the blown-up mattress, enjoyed a cup of coffee, and watched as Emily put together her professional work ensemble. While Emily could rock the pantsuit for the masses, I always loved her best in florals, cardigans, and older pieces of clothing with character that measured a mile long. "I'll see you soon," I said, while throwing suitcases and blankets in my trunk like a killer hoisting bodies. We have the kind of friendship where we might go a couple of months without speaking, or maybe a year without seeing each other. But to say it's like riding a bike understates our experience. Is it trauma bonding? Perhaps trauma with the lowercase t? Or maybe platonic soulmates in action? Is it because opposites attract and balance each other? The country frog appreciates the loud boisterousness of a city dog, while the city dog takes in more life around itself like the country frog? "See you soon," Emily said, climbing into her vehicle to head an hour into work. I, meanwhile, had 4 hours to go till North Carolina, and part of me was hankering for a breakfast biscuit.